Sometimes fear doesn't sound like screaming. Sometimes it sounds like a police radio calling your skin suspicious before anyone even learns your name. Rain hammered the empty parking lot outside the Quick Mart on Route 18 just after midnight, turning the cracked asphalt silver beneath the flashing patrol lights. Naomi Carter lay flat against the cold pavement with one cheek pressed near a puddle that smelled faintly like gasoline and wet concrete. Her dark hoodie was soaked through. Water dripped from the edge of her braided hair onto the sleeve of the officer pinning her wrists behind her back. A half-empty grocery bag sat nearby beside a dented green military backpack that looked older than the young officer standing 10 feet away with a trembling flashlight. Dispatch said she had aggressive dogs. Officer Briggs muttered, breathing hard as if he'd already decided how the night was supposed to end. His knee stayed planted against Naomi's shoulder while red and blue light flickered across the puddles around them. "Ma'am, where are the animals?" the younger cop asked, trying to sound calm. Naomi didn't answer right away. Her eyes stayed fixed on the darkness beyond the gas pumps where the rain swallowed everything past 30 feet. Somewhere far back near the tree line, metal clinked softly against metal. One time, then again. Briggs tightened his grip. "Don't play games with me." Naomi slowly inhaled through her nose. Her breathing stayed measured, controlled, almost military. "Officer," she said quietly, "you need to lower your voice." Briggs gave a dry laugh. "You giving orders now?" The automatic doors of the Quick Mart slid open behind them before closing again with a hollow buzz. No customers came out. The teenage cashier inside stood frozen behind the glass, phone still in his hand after making the 911 call. Naomi could feel the vibration of distant thunder through the pavement beneath her chest. But underneath that thunder was another sound. Familiar, rhythmic, fast paws striking wet ground somewhere beyond the darkness. Her fingers curled slightly against the pavement. Briggs noticed immediately. "See that?" he snapped toward the younger officer. "She's signaling them." "I'm not signaling anybody," Naomi replied. Her voice remained calm enough to make Briggs even angrier. Rainwater rolled down the side of her face as she slowly turned her head toward him. "I'm trying to stop you from making a mistake." Briggs looked toward the black stretch behind the parking lot where abandoned delivery trucks sat rusting near the woods. His hand drifted toward the flashlight on his belt. "The caller said there were 2 large attack dogs," he said. "And somehow you just happened to be here alone at midnight?" Naomi closed her eyes briefly. The sound came again, closer this time. Chains rattling. Heavy breathing cutting through rain. She knew that sound, knew the exact weight behind it. Belgian Malinois. Trained. Focused. Fast enough to cross the parking lot in seconds. "Officer," she whispered carefully, "please listen to me." But Briggs had already stood up, pulling Naomi roughly to her knees while rain soaked through both of them. The younger cop suddenly raised his flashlight toward the darkness beyond the gas pumps. His face drained of color. 2 shapes had appeared at the edge of the lot. Low, silent, watching. Then lightning cracked across the sky for half a second, and the dogs stepped into the light. The younger officer took one slow step backward as rain slid down the barrel of his flashlight. The 2 dogs stood perfectly still near the edge of the parking lot, their lean bodies glistening beneath the broken white glow of the gas station sign. They did not bark. They did not growl. That silence somehow felt heavier than noise. Naomi immediately recognized the tactical harness on the larger one. Sand-colored straps. Reinforced chest plate. Military grade. Her pulse tightened. "Atlas," she whispered under her breath before she could stop herself. One of the dogs tilted its head at the sound of the name. Briggs noticed instantly. "You know them," he snapped. Naomi slowly lifted her eyes toward the animals without moving her body too quickly. "Yes," she answered softly. "And if you keep shouting, you're going to make them nervous." Briggs scoffed, but the confidence in his face had started to crack around the edges. The younger officer, Ryan Cole, looked barely 30 years old. Rainwater dripped from the end of his nose while he tried to keep his flashlight steady. "Sergeant," he said carefully, "those dogs are not acting aggressive." Briggs ignored him. "Ma'am, I need you to explain right now why 2 military dogs are walking toward you in the middle of the night." Naomi stared at Atlas for another second. Then her eyes moved to the second dog beside him. Smaller. Female. Black mask around the eyes. Slight limp in the right front leg. Naomi felt something sink deep in her chest. "Scout," she breathed quietly. The female dog immediately lowered her ears at the sound of her name. Ryan glanced at Naomi in confusion. "They know you." Naomi nodded once. The rain intensified overhead, drumming against the metal roof above the gas pumps. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the Georgia sky. Naomi slowly shifted on her knees. "Please do not point lights directly into their eyes," she said. "And do not reach for your weapon unless I tell you to." Briggs gave a short, bitter laugh. "You expect me to take instructions from you?" Naomi finally turned toward him fully. Even kneeling on soaked pavement with mud staining her jeans, there was something steady about her posture. Controlled, disciplined, the kind of stillness people only learned through years of surviving pressure. "Officer," she said quietly, "those dogs were trained for combat zones overseas. Loud voices and sudden movements trigger stress responses. Right now they are trying to figure out whether you are a threat." Ryan lowered his flashlight slightly without realizing he had done it. Briggs noticed that too. "Stand your ground," Briggs ordered sharply. But Atlas had already started walking forward through the rain. Slow, focused, every step deliberate. Naomi could hear the faint jingle of metal tags beneath his harness. She remembered hearing that exact sound years earlier in dry desert wind thousands of miles away. Her throat tightened unexpectedly. Atlas stopped about 6 feet away from her. His amber eyes locked onto Naomi's face. Then slowly, almost cautiously, the massive dog sat down on the wet pavement. Scout followed beside him. The parking lot fell completely silent except for rainwater running through the storm drain nearby. Ryan lowered his flashlight completely now. "Oh my God," he whispered. Naomi swallowed hard as emotion pressed against the back of her voice. The last time she had seen those dogs had been nearly 3 years ago after her unit was disbanded. She had been told both animals were transferred to a federal holding facility after a failed private contractor deal. But looking at the scars along Atlas's shoulders and the fresh dirt caked in his Scout's fur, Naomi realized immediately something had gone very wrong. Briggs stared at the dogs in disbelief before looking back at Naomi. "Who exactly are you?" he demanded. Naomi looked down at Atlas sitting obediently in front of her despite the storm, despite the lights, despite the fear vibrating through the parking lot. Then she finally answered in a voice so calm it almost hurt to hear it. "I was their handler." For a moment nobody moved. Rainwater streamed down the patrol car windows while the gas station sign buzzed overhead with a weak electric hum. Atlas remained seated directly in front of Naomi, alert but calm, his amber eyes never leaving her face. Scout stayed pressed against his side, her chest rising and falling quickly beneath the soaked tactical harness wrapped around her ribs. Officer Briggs stared at Naomi like the answer she had just given did not fit the image he had already built in his mind. "You were military?" he asked slowly. Naomi nodded once. "United States Army K-9 Corps." Briggs glanced at the old green backpack lying near the puddle beside the patrol car. Suddenly, the worn fabric, the faded unit patch, even the way Naomi held herself began to look different. Ryan bent down carefully and picked up the bag. Mud dripped from the bottom as he turned it toward the flashing patrol lights. Sewn near the zipper was a weathered American flag patch beside stitched black lettering that read Staff Sergeant Naomi Carter. Ryan looked back at her with surprise. "You served overseas?" Naomi did not answer immediately. Her hand rested gently against Atlas's neck now, fingers buried lightly in wet fur. The large dog closed his eyes for half a second at her touch as though he recognized safety for the first time in years. "3 deployments," Naomi finally said. Briggs crossed his arms tightly against the rain. "Then why are you out here in the middle of nowhere with 2 missing military dogs?" Naomi looked toward Scout's injured leg. "Because somebody took them." Thunder rolled again in the distance. Ryan slowly lowered himself beside the backpack and opened the top carefully. Inside were neatly stacked folders sealed in plastic against the rain, a flashlight, bottled water, protein bars, and an old framed photograph. Ryan pulled the picture free. It showed Naomi several years younger standing beside Atlas and Scout in desert camouflage under a bright Middle Eastern sun. All 3 looked exhausted. All 3 looked proud. "These are your dogs," Ryan murmured. Naomi shook her head softly. "No, they were never property." Briggs exhaled impatiently through his nose. "You still have not explained why dispatch got a call about attacked dogs stalking people near this highway." Naomi's eyes hardened slightly for the first time that night. "Because they are scared." Briggs frowned. Scared dogs do not roam parking lots at midnight. Military dogs with trauma do, Naomi answered quietly. Rain rolled off the edge of the gas station roof in steady streams around them. Naomi slowly rose to her feet, while Atlas stayed perfectly beside her left leg. Scout limped closer until her shoulder brushed Naomi's knee. Neither dog made a sound. Ryan watched in disbelief. "How long have you been looking for them?" he asked. Naomi glanced toward the dark highway beyond the station. "Almost 6 weeks." Briggs looked unconvinced. "And you expect us to believe you tracked 2 combat dogs across 3 counties by yourself?" Naomi reached slowly into her jacket pocket. Both officers stiffened instinctively, but she only pulled out a folded receipt covered in handwritten notes, dates, and license plate numbers. "People talk," she said. "Truck stops, storage yards, illegal breeders, men offering cash for trained security dogs." Ryan's face tightened. "You think somebody stole them to sell?" Naomi looked down at Atlas again. "I know they did." The wind shifted suddenly through the parking lot, carrying the smell of wet pine trees from the woods behind the station. Atlas lifted his head immediately. His ears sharpened. Scout stiffened too. Naomi felt it at the same time. Something changed in the air. Briggs noticed the dogs reacting and instinctively reached toward his belt again. Naomi's voice became firm enough to cut through the storm. "Do not touch your weapon." Briggs froze. Atlas stared toward the tree line behind the gas station, where darkness moved between the pines. Then, somewhere deep beyond the rain, another dog barked. The bark echoed again from somewhere beyond the pine trees, deeper this time, followed by the sharp metallic rattle of a chain snapping against wood. Atlas immediately stood and positioned himself slightly in front of Naomi. Scout pressed close against Naomi's leg, ears raised toward the darkness behind the gas station. The rain carried the scent of wet dirt and diesel fuel through the empty lot, while the patrol lights painted the puddles in flashing red and blue. Officer Briggs turned toward the tree line, his jaw tightening hard enough for the muscle to twitch beneath the rain dripping from his face. "How many dogs are out there?" he demanded. Naomi listened carefully for another sound before answering. "At least one more. Maybe 2. Ryan looked nervous now. "You think they belong to the same people who took Atlas and Scout?" Naomi nodded slowly. "Military dogs do not wander this far alone. Somebody brought them here." Briggs stepped closer to Naomi, lowering his voice. "You should have called the police instead of chasing stolen dogs by yourself." Naomi almost smiled at that, but it disappeared before it fully reached her face. "I tried," she said quietly. Briggs frowned. "What does that mean?" Naomi looked past him toward the highway where headlights rolled through the rain in the distance like blurred white streaks. "It means after a while people stop listening when a black woman says something dangerous is happening." Ryan shifted uncomfortably beside the patrol car. Briggs opened his mouth to respond, but another sound cut through the storm. An engine. Low. Heavy. Somewhere behind the trees. Naomi's eyes sharpened instantly. "Truck," she whispered. Atlas growled softly under his breath for the first time all night. Not aggressive. Warning. Naomi crouched beside him and ran one hand gently along the side of his neck. Her fingers paused near the collar where she found fresh scrape marks against the metal buckle. "They moved too fast," she murmured to herself. Ryan leaned closer. "What?" Naomi looked up at him. "The people transporting these dogs. They were forced to stop nearby." Briggs glanced toward the woods again. "You are guessing." "No," Naomi answered calmly. "Listen." The engine sound faded for a second before returning louder than before. Tires rolled slowly over gravel somewhere behind the gas station property. Atlas stiffened immediately. Scout began pacing in small nervous circles beside Naomi. Ryan swallowed hard. "Sergeant, maybe we should call backup." Briggs kept staring toward the dark woods, pride and uncertainty fighting across his face. Naomi could already tell what kind of man he was. The type who trusted authority more than instinct. The type who mistook control for safety. She had met men like him before overseas and back home. Men who looked at her skin before they looked at her service record. Men who assumed anger made them right. But Atlas trusted her. Scout trusted her. And military dogs did not trust easily. Naomi slowly stood and wiped rainwater from her eyes. "There is probably a dirt access road behind those trees," she said. "If they are moving stolen K9 dogs tonight, they will not stay parked long." Briggs stared at her. "And you know this because?" Naomi reached down toward Atlas again. The dog immediately moved into perfect heel position beside her left leg without a command. "Because I trained dogs exactly like these for 4 years," she said. "And whoever has the others does not understand what frightened military dogs can do when they panic." Lightning flashed overhead, briefly illuminating the woods beyond the station. For half a second, Ryan thought he saw movement between the trees. A vehicle silhouette. Then darkness swallowed it again. Briggs finally grabbed his radio from his shoulder. "Dispatch, this is Unit 12 requesting additional support near Route 18 Quickmart. Possible illegal animal transport in progress." Static crackled through the rain. Naomi listened to the weak radio signal and quietly shook her head. "They are already leaving," she said. Briggs looked irritated. "You do not know that." But Atlas suddenly pulled against his harness, eyes fixed toward the woods with sharp, focused intensity. Naomi felt the leash tighten in her hand. Then she heard it. The unmistakable sound of a truck door slamming shut somewhere in the darkness. The sound of the truck door echoed through the trees like a warning nobody wanted to hear. Atlas immediately pulled harder against Naomi's grip, claws scraping across the wet pavement, while Scout let out a low, anxious whine beside him. The dogs were no longer calm. Their bodies had shifted into full alert, muscles tight beneath rain-soaked fur as they stared toward the darkness beyond the gas station. Officer Briggs grabbed the flashlight from Ryan and pointed it toward the woods, but the heavy rain swallowed most of the beam before it reached the tree line. "Stay here," Briggs ordered sharply. Naomi shook her head before he even finished speaking. "If those dogs out there panic, your lights and sirens will make everything worse." Briggs looked back at her with irritation burning behind his eyes. "You are not in charge of this scene." Naomi met his stare without raising her voice. "No, but I am the only person here those animals trust." Ryan glanced nervously between them while static crackled through Briggs's shoulder radio. Dispatch still had not answered. The storm overhead seemed to swallow every signal tonight. Somewhere in the woods another bark erupted, shorter this time, followed by frantic scratching against metal. Naomi instantly recognized the sound. A kennel crate. Small. Portable. Her stomach tightened. "There is another dog trapped back there," she said quietly. Atlas suddenly lunged forward 2 steps, nearly pulling the leash free from Naomi's hand. Scout followed immediately beside him. Both dogs were staring toward the same point deep beyond the trees. Naomi listened carefully through the rain. Engine idling. Metal rattling. A frightened animal breathing hard inside an enclosed space. Then she heard something else. A sharp electronic click. Her face changed instantly. "Move back," she said. Briggs frowned. "What now?" Naomi's eyes stayed fixed on the woods. "Shock collars." Ryan blinked. "What?" "Remote training collars," Naomi answered quickly. "Somebody is activating them." Atlas began pacing in tight circles now, stressed energy rippling through his body. Scout lowered herself near Naomi's leg and trembled visibly. Briggs looked toward the woods again. "How can you tell?" Naomi swallowed hard. "Because military dogs remember pain." The rain intensified around them, hammering the gas pumps and patrol cars so loudly it almost drowned out the sounds from the woods. Almost. Then came another bark. Higher. More desperate this time. Ryan took an uneasy step backward. "Sergeant, maybe we should wait for backup." But Briggs had already started walking toward the trees with one hand near his belt. Naomi moved instantly in front of him. "If you go in there loud and armed, those dogs will react." Briggs stopped inches from her, frustration boiling beneath his soaked uniform. "And if criminals are transporting stolen military dogs, I cannot just stand here." Naomi looked directly into his eyes. "You already did not listen to me once tonight." Briggs froze for half a second. The words landed harder than he expected. Naomi lowered her voice. "You saw a black woman standing alone in the rain and assumed she was the danger before you asked a single question." Ryan looked down immediately. Briggs's jaw tightened. Rain rolled off the brim of his cap, while red and blue lights flashed across Naomi's face. But before Briggs could answer, Atlas suddenly barked once. Loud, sharp, focused directly toward the woods. Then the engine's sound roared violently to life. Headlights burst through the pine trees without warning. A dark pickup truck exploded out from the dirt access road behind the gas station, tires spraying mud and water across the lot as it accelerated toward the highway entrance. Ryan jumped back in shock. Briggs reached for his radio. But Naomi was already moving. Atlas and Scout surged beside her through the rain as she sprinted across the parking lot toward the edge of the road, her voice cutting through the storm with military precision. Atlas, Scout, track. The cold rain hit Naomi's face as she ran toward the highway shoulder, boots splashing through shallow puddles beneath the flickering gas station lights. Atlas surged ahead beside her with powerful focus, while Scout stayed close to Naomi's right side despite the limp in her front leg. The pickup truck fishtailed across the wet access road before straightening toward Route 18, its headlights slicing through sheets of rain like pale knives. Behind Naomi, Officer Briggs shouted something into his radio, but the storm swallowed most of the words. Naomi did not slow down. She could already hear another sound beneath the truck engine now. Barking. Panicked. Muffled by metal walls. There were more dogs inside that truck. Atlas suddenly pulled hard toward the side of the road, where fresh tire tracks carved through mud beside the trees. Naomi dropped to one knee instantly, fingers brushing the wet ground while Atlas sniffed rapidly through the rain. Scout circled anxiously behind them. Briggs and Ryan finally reached her moments later, both breathing heavily. Patrol lights flashed behind them across the highway shoulder while thunder rolled overhead. "You are not chasing a moving vehicle on foot," Briggs snapped. Naomi ignored him for a second. Her eyes stayed fixed on Atlas as the dog sniffed the muddy tracks with intense concentration. Then Atlas looked directly at Naomi and let out a low sound deep in his throat. Not fear. Recognition. Naomi slowly exhaled. "There were at least 3 cages in that truck," she said quietly. Ryan stared at her. "How can you tell?" Naomi gently touched the side of Atlas's face. "Because he can." Rainwater dripped from the dog's muzzle while his ears twitched toward the highway. Naomi remembered nights overseas exactly like this. Dark roads. Engine sounds in the distance. Dogs tracking fear long before humans understood danger was nearby. For years after leaving the army, she had tried to forget those nights. Tried to bury them beneath quiet routines and long shelter shifts cleaning kennels nobody wanted to see. But standing beside Atlas again, hearing the rain strike metal and asphalt around her, she realized some parts of her had never truly left that world. Scout slowly lowered herself beside Naomi's leg, exhausted now. Naomi immediately noticed fresh raw marks hidden beneath the dog's collar. Her expression softened instantly. "Oh, Scout," she whispered. The dog leaned weakly against her knee. Briggs watched silently for the first time all night. The anger had started fading from his face, replaced by something less certain. Naomi carefully unclipped the soaked tactical leash from Atlas's harness before checking Scout's collar again. Ryan looked startled. "You are letting him off leash?" Naomi nodded toward Atlas. "He knows what he is doing." Briggs crossed his arms tightly against the cold rain. "And if he runs into traffic?" Naomi looked up at him calmly. "Military dogs are trained to protect human life before their own instincts." Briggs had no answer for that. Atlas suddenly turned toward Naomi and sat perfectly still despite the storm around them. Waiting, watching her eyes. Naomi placed one hand against his chest. "Find them," she whispered. Atlas took off immediately into the darkness beside the highway, vanishing beyond the rain-soaked trees within seconds. Scout whined softly as if she wanted to follow, but Naomi gently steadied her with one hand. Then everything became strangely quiet again. The truck was gone now. Only distant thunder and the hiss of passing tires echoed through the night. Ryan lowered his flashlight slowly. "You really trust him that much?" Naomi stared into the darkness where Atlas had disappeared. Rain rolled down her face while red and blue lights flashed across the wet road behind her. "Atlas once pulled 2 injured soldiers out of a collapsed building during a mortar attack," she said softly. "After that, trusting him became the easiest thing I ever learned." Nobody spoke for several seconds. Even Briggs stayed silent now. Then, far down the highway somewhere beyond the storm, Atlas barked once. Strong, sharp, certain. Atlas barked again somewhere beyond the curtain of rain, and this time the sound carried urgency. Naomi immediately grabbed Scout's leash and moved toward the patrol car without hesitation. "He found them," she said. Officer Ryan looked toward Sergeant Briggs, waiting for instructions, but Briggs no longer seemed as certain as he had earlier that night. Water dripped from the edge of his cap, while the red and blue lights flashed across his face in uneven waves. Naomi opened the rear door of the patrol SUV and carefully guided Scout inside. The exhausted dog climbed in slowly before curling against the seat with trembling breaths. Naomi gently touched the side of Scout's neck. "Stay," she whispered. Scout obeyed instantly. Briggs watched the interaction in silence. There was no fear in the dog's eyes when Naomi spoke. Only trust. Deep trust built over years. Naomi closed the door softly before turning back toward the highway. "Atlas will not leave the trail unless he found something important," she said. Ryan immediately reached for the driver's side door. "Then let us move." Briggs hesitated for only a second before nodding once. Moments later, the patrol SUV sped through the rain along Route 18, tires hissing across soaked asphalt while Naomi sat in the back seat beside Scout. The storm had started thinning now, leaving streaks of mist floating low above the highway. Naomi stared out the side window, following every distant sound with trained attention. Then she saw it. About half a mile ahead near an abandoned way station, a dark pickup truck sat crooked beside the road with one rear door hanging open beneath a broken streetlight. Atlas stood near the truck, barking sharply toward the woods behind it. Ryan slowed the patrol SUV immediately. Briggs stepped out first this time, but his posture had changed. Slower, more careful. Naomi exited behind him while Scout limped from the vehicle to join Atlas. The air smelled like wet pine and motor oil. Somewhere nearby, another dog whimpered weakly. Naomi followed the sound toward the back of the abandoned truck. 3 metal transport crates sat partially covered beneath a torn tarp. One crate was empty. Another held a frightened German shepherd pressed tightly against the corner. The third crate contained a younger Malinois with a military tattoo still visible inside one ear. Naomi's face tightened painfully. "Oh no," she whispered. Ryan crouched beside the cages, stunned. "These are army dogs." Naomi nodded slowly. "Former army dogs." Atlas stayed close beside her while Scout limped toward the younger Malinois and touched noses gently through the crate opening. The frightened dog immediately calmed down. Briggs stood frozen in the rain staring at the scene. There were feeding invoices scattered inside the truck bed. Fake veterinary records. Shock collar remotes. Crates too small for the animals inside them. Naomi quietly picked up one faded transport document soaked by rainwater. Her eyes moved across the page before stopping at a familiar military serial number. Atlas's old designation code. Ryan noticed the change in her face. "What is it?" Naomi swallowed hard before answering. "They sold them after discharge." Briggs frowned. "Sold who?" Naomi slowly looked up at him. "The dogs nobody wanted anymore." Rain tapped softly against the metal cages around them, while distant thunder faded farther into the night. Briggs stared at Atlas, standing protectively beside Naomi. The massive dog had once served soldiers overseas. Now he had ended up abandoned inside an illegal transport operation, like damaged equipment nobody cared to remember. Naomi crouched beside the frightened German shepherd and slowly opened the crate door. The dog flinched at first until Naomi softly removed the shock collar from around its neck. Her hands moved carefully, almost tenderly. Briggs watched every second of it. Then his eyes drifted back toward Naomi herself, toward the woman he had forced onto wet pavement less than an hour earlier without asking who she was, without asking what she had survived. The storm had nearly passed now, and for the first time all night the silence around them no longer felt threatening. It felt heavy. The rain had softened into a cold mist by the time additional patrol units finally arrived at the abandoned way station. Flashing lights reflected across puddles and rusted guardrails while officers moved carefully around the truck and cages, speaking in low voices that sounded strangely small beneath the open night sky. Naomi stayed near the dogs. She wrapped an old emergency blanket around the trembling German shepherd while Scout rested quietly against her leg and Atlas sat nearby, watching every movement around them with calm alertness. The younger Malinois inside the third crate had finally stopped shaking after Naomi removed the shock collar and placed her hand gently against the side of the cage. Officer Ryan spoke with animal control near the patrol vehicles, but Sergeant Briggs had barely moved for several minutes. He stood beside the open truck door staring silently at the rain-soaked transport documents still scattered across the metal floor. Naomi could tell he was replaying the night in his head now. The assumptions, the anger, the way he had looked at her before he knew her name. Briggs slowly walked toward Naomi through the wet gravel. The hard edge in his face was gone. In its place sat something heavier, something quieter. He stopped a few feet away while Atlas watched him carefully. Naomi remained kneeling beside the frightened German shepherd, one hand resting gently against the dog's shoulder. "You tracked them for 6 weeks alone?" Briggs finally asked. Naomi nodded once. "Mostly at night." Briggs looked down at the mud beneath his boots. "Why alone?" Naomi gave a tired smile that barely appeared beneath the misty glow of the patrol lights. "Because people care more about stolen property than discarded service dogs." Her voice stayed calm, but Briggs felt the weight inside those words immediately. Naomi looked toward Atlas. "After deployment ends, everybody talks about heroes for a little while," she said softly. "Then eventually the uniforms disappear, the dogs get older, and people move on." Nearby, one of the officers carefully carried fresh water toward the cages while Ryan helped guide animal control through the evidence inside the truck. Naomi watched all of it quietly before speaking again. "Atlas saved lives overseas. Scout detected explosives before convoys entered villages. Those dogs protected people who never even knew their names." Briggs swallowed hard. Rainwater still clung to the shoulders of Naomi's soaked hoodie, but she never once complained about the cold. Even after everything tonight, her attention remained completely on the animals around her. Briggs suddenly remembered the moment outside the gas station when he forced her onto the pavement before asking a single question. The memory sat in his chest like a stone. "Miss Carter," he said quietly. Naomi looked up at him. Briggs removed his patrol jacket slowly and held it toward her. "You are freezing." Naomi hesitated for a second before accepting it. The jacket felt warm from his body heat despite the cold night air. Briggs looked at Atlas sitting beside her. "I judged you the second I saw you." Naomi said nothing. Briggs lowered his eyes. "And I was wrong." The mist drifted softly through the way station lights, while distant thunder faded farther into the hills. Naomi studied his face for a long moment, searching for anger or pride, but neither remained there now. Only regret. Atlas slowly relaxed beside her, as if even he could feel the shift happening in the silence around them. Naomi finally pulled the oversized patrol jacket tighter around her shoulders. "Fear makes people do unfair things," she said quietly. Briggs nodded once. "That does not excuse them." For several seconds nobody spoke. Then Naomi reached down and gently scratched behind Scout's ears while the exhausted dog leaned against her knee. "What matters," she said softly, "is whether people choose to stay the same after they realize they were wrong." Briggs looked at her in silence, while flashing red and blue lights reflected across the wet gravel around them. For the first time that night, he could not look away. By the time the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the storm had completely passed. Thin silver fog drifted across the abandoned way station while the last patrol vehicles prepared to leave. The rescued dogs had been transferred carefully into warm transport vans lined with blankets and fresh water. The frightened German shepherd was finally asleep. The younger Malinois rested quietly beside Scout with its head tucked against her side, as if it already understood it was safe now. Naomi stood near the edge of the highway holding a paper cup of black coffee that had long since gone cold in her hands. Atlas sat beside her without a leash, calm and steady beneath the pale morning sky. The world felt strangely quiet after everything that had happened during the night. No sirens, no shouting, only the distant sound of tires humming along wet pavement far down Route 18. Officer Ryan loaded the final evidence box into a patrol SUV before offering Naomi a small respectful nod from across the lot. She nodded back gently. Then he drove away. One by one the flashing lights disappeared into the morning mist until only Sergeant Briggs's vehicle remained parked beneath the broken streetlight. Briggs walked slowly toward Naomi carrying her old military backpack in both hands. The fabric had dried stiff from rainwater, but the faded army patch still showed clearly beneath the growing sunlight. He stopped beside her and carefully handed it back. "They found records inside the truck," he said quietly. "There are probably more stolen dogs connected to this operation." Naomi rested one hand against the worn backpack strap. "Then keep looking," she answered softly. Briggs nodded once. "We will." Atlas lifted his head slightly when Briggs stepped closer, but the dog no longer looked tense around him. Briggs noticed that immediately. He glanced down at Atlas before speaking again. "Funny thing about dogs," he said with a tired smile. "They seem to know who deserves another chance." Naomi looked toward the sunrise beginning to spread faint orange light across the wet highway. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence no longer felt uncomfortable now. It felt honest. Briggs finally cleared his throat. "Miss Carter," he said quietly, "I cannot change how I treated you tonight." Naomi remained still. "No," she agreed gently. Briggs lowered his eyes briefly before continuing. "But I will remember it for the rest of my life." The morning breeze moved softly through the pine trees behind them, carrying the clean smell of rain-soaked earth across the empty road. Naomi studied Briggs carefully for a second before slipping one arm through the strap of her old backpack. "That is usually where change starts," she said. Briggs looked at her, surprised by the absence of bitterness in her voice. But Naomi had carried heavier things than anger for too many years to hold on to hatred now. Atlas rose slowly to his feet beside her, while Scout limped carefully from the transport van to join them. The younger Malinois followed close behind, 3 dogs walking together again beneath the fading storm clouds. Naomi gently adjusted the borrowed patrol jacket still resting around her shoulders before stepping toward the roadside. Briggs instinctively moved aside to let her pass. For a brief second, the early sunlight caught the old military patch on Naomi's backpack and turned the worn thread gold. Atlas walked calmly at her left side. Scout stayed close against her right leg. The younger Malinois followed behind them with uncertain but hopeful steps. Naomi never looked back toward the patrol car. But Briggs watched her walk away down the quiet shoulder of Route 18 until the morning fog slowly wrapped around all 4 figures together. Then even the sound of the dog's footsteps faded into silence.